Well, hello, everybody, and good afternoon. It's Lynee here with Interview Like an Expert, and as advertised, I've got a live interview I'm doing today. I'm really excited to bring this to you. As a career coach, I work with individuals on improving their professional branding, and I also share strategies that are going to help you to support a more successful job search. And by the way, for anybody who's tuning in, before I forget, please say hi to us. Let us know that you're here with us so that we can see who's in here. Hello, hello. Yes, it is fabulous that we have this interview. I'm so excited. Lots of good stuff you're going to be hearing today. So please keep the comments coming so I know that there are some folks in here with us. And if you have any questions as we go through, and I'll remind you throughout a little bit, please type them in the comments and we will try to get to them. So one of the things that I talk about with clients and that people seem so uncomfortable with is the idea of networking during a job search. I think people have a lot of ideas about what networking means to them, and mostly they do not view it as something they want to do at all. In part, I think it's because a lot of people feel like this is intrusive, right? Or it's going to be, received negatively. So I thought it would be great to bring all of you a very different perspective on this. And the comments are coming in. Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I want to bring a positive perspective to networking in order to give you all a better understanding of how it can work, what it looks like and sounds like, and how it can make a really big difference in your job search. So today, I am so happy to have Julie Thornton with me. Welcome, Julie.
Good morning. How are you, Lynee?
I'm great, and it's so nice to have you here. Now, Julie is an executive coach. She's currently living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but she spent 20 years here in the Chicagoland area, and she spent the last 20 years of her career in human resources, executive search, and executive coaching. She has coached and mentored across all lines of industries and across all business functions. And for the last year, she has served as an executive alumni coach at Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business, where she's providing one-on-one coaching to alumni who find themselves in the middle of a professional transition, which is so cool. So welcome, Julie. So happy to have you today.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. Well, we're coming together today to help people with networking and their elevator pitches too. We talked a little bit about highlighting that as well. So improving your networking skills and having a strong elevator pitch will help you whether you're actively or passively engaged in a job search. And Julie, like I said a moment ago, many people avoid networking. It could be for any number of reasons. They're uncomfortable. They feel like they don't know how to do it. They think it will be unwelcome, or maybe they just don't know where to start. But that's where you come in today. So let's dig into our conversation. First of all, why don't you tell me and everybody a little bit about why you felt it was so important to talk about networking today?
I think there are really a few reasons why. The main reason being that I think that applicant tracking systems have become such a huge piece of the job search and frankly the recruiting and the job application process that I think applicants think that they can submit a resume and click a button and do nothing else and get a job. And a recent statistic that I read was that less than 3% of all positions are filled strictly through applying online, clicking a button, getting an interview, and getting an offer. 72% of all positions are filled through a known candidate. So someone who you've met previously, you had a great conversation, maybe you had a cup of coffee, and now you have a job opening and you're going back to them and hoping that they'll apply to your position. So I think in this age of technology, we tend to think that technology can work for us and instead of networking, when in fact it really has to be both.
I couldn't agree more. I was just talking to somebody about this earlier today, and I often say to my candidates, applying is the first step. It's not the only step. So you and I are super in sync on that. So, all right, well, let's dig in a little bit and help people understand the value of networking and how it can work for them, no matter what their profession. Maybe talk about that a little bit and help people understand how this can work for them and not feel gross, not feel awkward, not feel uncomfortable doing it. I think it's a little bit about kind of resetting people's expectations about what it is and how it works.
Yeah, I think I actually, when I work with my clients, I like to use the word connecting and having conversations instead of using the word networking. And the reason why, I think when anyone, myself included, when you hear the word networking, you kind of picture a large room of 250 people in suits and with business cards tucked in their pocket, and it's awkward. And how am I going to walk up to that person and just start talking? And the truth is, networking can happen anywhere with anyone at any time. I mean, it can be as you're getting your hair cut. It can be in this climate. It can be when you reach out to friends on Zoom. It can be in the grocery store. It can really be anywhere. And it's simply having conversations with people and letting them know that you're in a career transition, because if you don't talk about it, no one knows. And then simply asking for connections. I don't think it has to feel and sound like, a professional networking event, which I'm going to say probably most people don't necessarily enjoy.
Me included. I agree. I think that you're right. I think that making connections is what it's about. And I think that that word networking definitely just kind of has a negative connotation, and for kind of good reason. To your point, those events that are set up formally for networking or kind of forced now, they feel like they're forced because they are kind of forced sometimes. And so for most people, that's not a comfortable position to be in. And I was in sales my whole career, and I didn't like doing it because there is this awkward kind of process involved in it. But really, like you said, it's just having a conversation with people. And I want to just reemphasize something you said that I think is so important, and that's just talking about it, because people don't realize the power of just that, just having a conversation, letting people know you're unemployed. There's no shame in it, for one thing. Certainly not now during COVID, and even pre-COVID. The culture of business now is that there are often mass layoffs, right, for cost-cutting purposes. When a company isn't hitting their numbers, or when a disaster like this one strikes, for any number of reasons. But this is a regular thing, unfortunately. So what I often remind my clients of, and I'm sure you do too, is that this is commonplace, and employers understand that this is a common part of the workplace environment right now. It's not a reflection on you personally. So let people know that you're looking, let people know that you have a need, because people at their hearts really all want to help each other. I think most people do anyway. And so that's the first step to getting some help.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always tell my clients too is put yourself in the shoes of the person who you are networking with and asking for a connection. You would absolutely, at a very basic level, want to help them. If you knew someone to connect them with, you would feel good about connecting them. There would be no part of you that felt put out or asked a strange question. I also think in this environment, it's important to open up connecting and networking with a simple question of, how are you doing? How's your family? Wow, are you all at home? The kids are in school at home. How are you doing? How are you feeling? It's really a great connecting conversation starter. Um, to start networking by asking questions instead of thinking about, oh my gosh, how am I going to start talking about myself? That will feel forced. If I simply, for example, would walk up to you and say, Lene, it's great to see you. How have you been? How are the kids? How are you doing?
Right.
Asking questions instead of initiating by talking about yourself is certainly going to feel more natural in the end.
Right. I mean, we did this before we got on our call today, right? We were sitting here for a few minutes talking about our kids. I mean, this is, again, that's one of the lessons in sales, but it helps when you can just kind of have that as a normal conversation and not having to break into a circle of people, right? And so it's really just thinking about, like, how would you talk to a friend of yours about your situation, and try to have that same conversation with somebody who might be able to help you, or with your friend who might be able to connect you with a person who can help you. So I'd love to hear some of your top tips. I know when we did our pre-interview a little while ago, you had some really great ideas that people can easily implement, and that maybe won't stress them out too much. I think we covered a few of them, and that's just kind of being normal, having a normal conversation to open. But what are some other tips you've got for people that might help them?
Yeah, I think just to expand a little bit on the how do I start talking to people, I think if you're someone who just isn't comfortable with initiating conversation, and frankly, just to give everyone kind of an out. I think that's a lot of people to walk up to someone who maybe you don't know well and they're not your best friend and initiate conversation. I think it's great to just have 2 to 3 questions in your mind of what you could talk about, weather, traffic, you know, the Bears, the Cubs, whatever it might be. Right now it's the pandemic and the quarantine, and but have something in your mind before you start talking to them that you feel comfortable talking about. And it's just a simple conversation starter. Secondly, it is a numbers game. I mean, networking is sales and you are the product. So my example is I always say if you're out selling pens and you only call on 10 people versus you call on 50 people, you're probably going to have better results reaching out to 50 potential customers. So networking is a numbers game. If you're reaching out to 2 people a week, you aren't going to see as good of results if you were reaching out to 2 people per day. And then the last two are just, I always have clients kind of make a top 20 contact list. Who are these people that you're going to reach out to? Most of my clients want to start with their business contacts. I suggest that you think of your entire network and every single person you know, every single person you come in contact in your week, within your week. Put the people at the top of the list who you consider to be well connected. So we all have those friends who walk into Starbucks or walk into a restaurant and they know 15 people who they walk past before they ever get to their table. Those people should be at the top of the list. They're considered to be well connected.
Yep.
And secondly, the people that who know you well and who you know well. So if you're picking up the phone to network and you're calling someone who you consider to be well connected, and they know you well and you know them well, that's a much easier conversation than a business contact from 10 years ago who you haven't talked to in a while and who maybe isn't exactly sure what you're up to. So I guess those are my quick
Yeah.
tips on just sort of how to get started.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that people always, are going to do better. The people who know you are going to be able to promote you better, and they'll be able to more quickly think about ways that you could fit in somewhere because they have, knowledge of your background. So that's a great tip. I know everybody loves when I give real life examples, and I'm sure they would love to hear them from you too. So do you have any networking success stories you could share with the group just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about? Because sometimes people feel like this is very abstract and how does this apply to me or how could it possibly work? So any example, real life examples you could share.
Yeah, and this sort of goes along with that. Think of everyone who you know and not just your business contacts within your industry. I have many examples. And the ones I always like to use are those that started with a conversation with someone who they never expected would lead them to their next opportunity. The first one I'm thinking of is I was working with a CFO candidate, and he really kind of felt like his network was exhausted. And we were having the coaching conversation of like, wow, I think I've reached out to everyone I know. And he was home at lunchtime, and the person who was sort of their housekeeper happened to be there with him, and this person was in the kitchen and they kind of wondered what he was doing home. And he said, well, I'm actually in a career transition. And so my hours are a little flexible right now. I've got 2 weeks of work left, and kind of went back to what he was doing. And the housekeeper said, well, I actually just came from a house of this other person who is a business owner. And it's kind of ironic that we were just talking about how they're looking for a new CFO. And so he said, kind of, sort of skeptical, I guess, of the conversation or the situation, and said, okay. And so this housekeeper said, well, I can connect the two of you. And lo and behold, that's who hired him. And
Wow.
so we laughed over coffee about a week later. And he said to me, you told me when we first met that I might just be having this random conversation and that might be, where I land my next opportunity. So that's one example. Another one is a client of mine about a year ago, we were discussing about how to expand her network. So you feel like, again, you've sort of tapped all the people you know. And so she's a big hiker. And so I had suggested meetup groups. I said, meetup groups are kind of an easy way to get outside of your circle and expand your network. So she really enjoys hiking and she decided to join this hiking meetup. And the beauty of a hiking meetup is you hike. So you're with these people for a while. And I would say she's really on the more introverted side. At the end of the day, she called me at the end of this hiking meetup. They were going to drive somewhere about 20 minutes away and hike for 2 hours. And she said, I never ever had to think about how I was going to initiate conversation because we all love hiking. So the conversation was very simple. Then we started asking each other, "Where are you from? What do you do?" And she said, "And I could hear your voice in my head, and I could hear you saying, just say it out loud." Well, I'm actually in a career transition. And again, lo and behold, the person who she was hiking with at the time was looking for a systems administrator, which is what her occupation was. She went through a couple rounds of interviews and ended up landing the job.
Wow.
So I guess, hiking meetup and a housekeeper. I also have a yoga instructor example,
Mhm.
a lot of examples like that, who it did not look like picking up the phone and calling a business contact. It was simply someone having a conversation with someone who they came in contact with.
It's so true. I think that, again, this goes back to the point of just talking, about yourself, but doing it in a comfortable manner. I think, one of my clients recently applied for a job at Morgan Stanley. He's not a broker, but it was for like a staff kind of support, a high level staff support position, and he ended up applying, and it just so happens that that's his brokerage. He has saved his money, and that's Morgan Stanley is that brokerage he worked with. So his next move after applying was to get in contact with his broker and to find some contacts who could help him maybe navigate into the organization. He's already had an interview. They're moving slowly. It's because of COVID, and that's going to happen in some cases. But certainly having an inside person who can say, hey, this might be another person to connect to is such a great idea. That's funny, your example about hiking. I went to, it wasn't Meetup. What's the website? Is it meetup.org or .com? Do you know? I don't even know, but you can just .org. Yeah, that's a great one. And I happened to discover a hiking group here where I live through a different I guess event or commitment that I was involved in. And you're right. That's exactly what happened on the hike. I didn't know any of these women. There were 20 women and me on this hike, all total strangers to me. And I thought, ooh, how's this going to be? Right. And I'm an outgoing person, by the way.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be even, introverted to feel uncomfortable sometimes with these things, but I'm outgoing, and these women were so nice, and we did just strike up conversation and talk for the 2 hours that we were hiking. And then we all went to lunch afterward, and so many people were asking me about what I do. And I sat there thinking, this is crazy. I would have never thought I'd be talking about my job with these women who I just met, but I was. So your example rings true even for me and for my clients. So again, I hope that helps illustrate for folks, how you can do this and how it can be easily done. Just a quick reminder before we talk a little bit about elevator pitches. If you guys have any questions that you want answered or any other thoughts or any feedback, we'd love to see it. I see a lot of people are on with us, so I'm so happy to see that. So
I think one quick last point about even the
Yeah.
meetup groups is that
Yeah.
I think the awesome thing about an association or a group that you are a part of, and I'll use college alumni groups are terrific for this.
Yeah.
You know that everyone you see in that group, you know you have something in common with them,
Right.
as opposed to kind of a random room of people that you have, so you can walk up to anyone and say, oh, you went to Ohio State. I mean, you already know that when you walk in. So I think meetup groups are the same way. If you went to a gardening meetup group, you know that you all love gardening. So that the conversation starts pretty seamlessly and easily.
Right, really organically. Haha, no pun intended on gardening.
Exactly.
Okay, so great. Well, let's move on. I think we covered that well, and I hope you guys all can kind of hear. It's really not that hard to network, and it's going to benefit you greatly. This is an essential piece to your job search, not just now, not just during these times where there's a lot of people out looking for work, but ongoing. Think about it as a simple conversational opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about elevator pitches, which is something I get questioned about quite frequently, and I'm sure you do too and work with your clients on it. So first, let's just, for those who may or may not know, I should say, tell us what's an elevator pitch.
So an elevator pitch is really, in simplest terms, it's your brand. It's your verbal brand. I always say it's about between 30 to 45 seconds when you say it out loud. I think 45 seconds is actually definitely on the high end.
Yeah.
I tell most of my clients to keep it closer to 30 seconds. frankly, it's because if you talk any longer, the person you're talking to is not going to hear the
Right.
last part of it. As humans, unfortunately, we have very short attention spans.
Yeah.
And it really answers two questions. It answers, what do you do and what are you looking for in 30 seconds?
Mhm.
I do find that it's one of the hardest assignments that I give my clients, because I think if we all had 3 minutes to talk about what we do and what we're looking for, much easier assignment than
Right.
putting it all into 30 seconds. And I like to call it a conversation igniter.
Mm.
You're really igniting conversation. You are not trying to explain your entire resume. You're not trying to cover your entire LinkedIn profile. You're really trying to throw something out there to spark someone wanting to ask more questions and want to know more about you.
I agree. I think that it's, conversation's a two-way street. And, the more I observe lately, and I just saw somebody I follow on Instagram speaking about this actually yesterday. And she was talking about how the one thing that she would tell people in the world, if they could change, she could change one thing, would be to listen more.
Right.
In
So true.
conversation, people are waiting to talk instead of listening. And so the art of conversation is asking questions. And I think that what a lot of people suffer from is, like you said, trying to kind of say everything that they can about themselves all at once for fear that they're not going to get a chance. But really, to your point, I love Conversation Igniter because I think that you are trying to pique their interest, right?
Mhm.
You're trying to get them like to go, that's interesting. Tell me more about it, right? That's
Right.
really your only goal. It's not to have them know everything about you and have your whole history laid out before them. It's really just to kind of ignite that next step in the conversation.
Right.
So why is it important, and how can I create a good one? Like, how do I go about creating a good 30-second? I know you kind of just gave us the what I do, right? And
And
what
what
was
you
it?
do and what are you looking for?
And what are you looking for? So those are the two things. So how do you suggest people go about it?
So I usually, it's kind of a simple pen to paper exercise. I always
Mhm.
tell people, write more than, I mean, their homework with me is to write one, and then we come together and we kind of work through it together.
Yeah,
Um, I prefer they write more than they need instead of less, because obviously I can't really add information about them into it.
right.
But you really want it to be, you want to make sure that people understand who to connect you with, because
Mhm.
at the end of the elevator pitch, you're going to say something like, I'm in the process of expanding my network and I'm really trying to gain connections. Might you know of anyone who it might make sense for me to connect with, knowing my background and knowing what I'm looking for?
Mhm.
And so once you have that specific ask, if they don't really understand where you fit within an organization, it's really, really hard to think about who to connect you with. So for example, if let's say that your title is, you're saying that you're in B2B sales, and you're looking to transition into sales, I always say, give somebody at least a sector, maybe it's healthcare, technology, and banking. Because if you are asking me to think of my entire Rolodex, it's
Yeah.
much harder for me to think of who to connect you with, as opposed to if you said, Julie, who might it make sense for me to connect with within your network, who might want to speak with someone in B2B sales in healthcare. Well, now I'm at least only thinking of people that I know, who I know in healthcare, as opposed to everyone I know who's connected to sales. So it's important because it's your brand and it's what you want people to think of when they think of you. Um, my biggest piece of advice is, if you're trying to drop any piece of your brand, then don't say it out loud. For example, if you spent 20 years in engineering and you're now looking to get into sales, but related to engineering, and you want to get out of the tactical part of engineering, then you might not want to say engineering 3 times. Because now when I think of you, I think engineer and I'm not
Right.
thinking sales.
Right.
And unfortunately, as humans, we hear something and then it sticks with us, even if it's something that we're not supposed to be remembering.
Right. Well, and that's a great point because I think a lot of people I speak with will tell me, here's what I've been doing, but here's what I want to do. And it's like, you really just want to talk about what you want to do. And hopefully some of what you have done relates to that. That's definitely key. So you're right. it's a less is more approach, right? We want to hook people and kind of give them, like, pique their interest, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love, what you said. It's just about keeping it simple, right? And I love this idea that you just mentioned about make it simple for the recipient. And that's why talking for 45 seconds or, God forbid, 3 minutes is not a good idea, because that's not easy for me as the
30 seconds is a
recipient.
pretty good gauge. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So, as a recipient, when I do interview coaching with people and they answer a question and they go on and on, I'll have to, afterwards say, okay, that's way more information than I needed for tell me about yourself. I really want something much more simple because I got lost in this whole story that you told me. And I'm intensely listening, right? My goal is to listen to every word they say, and I'm taking notes on every word they say, but I know that the person interviewing them isn't going to be quite as maybe always engaged.
Right.
So you have to account for that too. But I love keeping it simple for them, recognizing that it's about your audience, right? I've been talking about this in my group. When you interview, it's not about you, it's about them. It's everything is about the person who you are engaging with. And really making sure that your angle is to ensure that you're making it easy for them to understand your experience or to help you in this case, right?
Absolutely. I think another key piece is, I like for people to make, I call them passion statements. So
Yes.
sometimes we're good at something that we don't like doing. Probably every client of mine has something that's part of their brand that
Yes.
they actually really don't enjoy doing, but they have passion for 80% of whatever role they have. So I think it's important to say something like, and I'll use coaching as an example. I could simply say, I'm an executive coach who works with XYZ clients. Or I could say, I'm executive coach and I really, really love to walk beside my clients through career transitions. That gets people a little more excited about what you do when they
Yes.
hear that you love what you do. Or, I'm looking for an opportunity where I can utilize my coaching skills and help clients, work through transitions because I really love something. And all companies want to hire someone who can't wait to do whatever job they're interviewing for. They're
Exactly.
assuming that all 4 or 5 people they're interviewing are potentially qualified, but do all 5 of these people really want to come and do this?
Right. I tell people this all the time for interviewing. I say, and I use the word passion as well. So, you know, I said, when they talk to me about it, I'm like, you need to make sure you say this in an interview because you'd be shocked at how many people don't.
Don't. Right.
You'd be shocked at how many people don't. And how impactful it is to me when I hear it is the receiver of the information, because it does set you apart when you're speaking with people. And I really think that that's actually, going back to where we started at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about how it's very difficult to differentiate yourself on paper because of applicant tracking systems. And I completely agree. Where you differentiate is in these connections, is in these personal conversations, whether it's through, connecting with people and kind of figuring out if they can maybe help put you in touch with people who can help you, or whether it's in an interview, and making this case for why you're the preferred candidate. And that's your opportunity to stand out. So that's another reason, perhaps maybe for networking and elevator pitches, getting comfortable talking about yourself and really enjoying it, which a lot of people don't,
Right.
is really important to you kind of, being a standout. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I just was going to say, I think most people are uncomfortable talking about themselves.
Yep. Yep. Even salespeople, a lot of people really just don't like it, even if they're very accomplished and very good at what they do. Um, so for the elevator pitch, to just end on that, then, so how do they use it then to have a more successful job search, in your opinion? I mean, is it just through, like, in these connection conversations and igniters, or any other places where they're using it? I also think it could be handy probably in the tell me about yourself question in an interview, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when my clients write an elevator pitch, we kind of look at it, and um, I would say 90% of the time, it can actually be copied and pasted and put into the about section on LinkedIn.
I agree.
The only time that isn't the case is if they maybe have a couple elevator pitches because they're considering maybe 2 different possibilities of a next step.
Yeah.
But typically it can be used in that section. Certainly if you're doing, if maybe once a day you're reaching out to someone via email, you can copy and paste it and put maybe a little introductory piece to it. So you can say it out loud. It can certainly be in a tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
I think that it's one of those things. It's like if, and you know, I'll use like selling a pen as an example. If
Hmm.
you are out trying to market pens, but you really don't feel completely comfortable about why the pen is so great, you're probably not going to sell a lot of pens. I mean, you have to be really comfortable and confident about where your value add is
Yeah.
as you're networking. And so I think the elevator pitch is you have to own it and you have to feel completely confident about the words. And I think once you do, it does take saying it a few times. The first few
Yeah.
times you might feel a little like you're stumbling through it. It shouldn't sound scripted. It should sound like
Right.
you're simply talking about yourself. And once you get to that comfort level, I think connecting and networking becomes a little easier.
I agree. And the other place I was just thinking when you mentioned LinkedIn, which is a great point, just one more place where I think you could use that elevator pitch, because I coach my clients on how can you cold connect on LinkedIn, kind of network on LinkedIn, because it's a great resource. You could take that elevator pitch and leverage it in a connection invitation. So I often tell people, for a connection invitation, you're very limited character count, but you can write like what I like to tell them is a wow factor. Like, what is
Yeah.
special about you, right? What's special? I had a guy who had spent 30 plus years in investment, like he was a bond trader, and he had gains of like 9% every year for like 30 years. And I'm like, that's your wow factor, right?
Yeah.
That you lead with that, right? That's like your headline, if you will, like however you want to kind of concept it. And then after that, you would say something like, I'm a bond trader who's had, returns of 9% for over 30 years, consistently for over 30 years. I'm in the process of looking for new opportunities, and I'd love to connect. It's something that simple, something to pique their interest, get them to look at your profile, which hopefully is completely up to date.
Yeah.
And you can engage with people that way. And the other thing about networking or connecting, if we don't want to even call it networking, is what people forget too, is that every job that's available isn't posted somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? So kind of to your point, like, I don't know if the CFO who found that job, if they were actively recruiting or not. Sometimes they're not, or sometimes they're doing kind of a clandestine search, right? They're just working through their network because they want a referral in. And people sometimes will hesitate when I suggest to them, hey, there's this job at this company that's a fit for you, except it's too junior level. Okay, so let's use that example. Maybe it's an assistant level, but you're a little bit more senior, or vice versa, whatever. I'm like, it still doesn't hurt to try and reach out to that hiring manager and let them know, hey, I'm looking for something. If something comes up at my level, I would love to be considered for it, because you might be able to navigate your way into a job that either is in process of being posted, that maybe they would consider once they look at your qualifications, right? Adding, or they know somebody's on their way out, but they haven't, started recruiting yet. There's a zillion possibilities. And I think that's the other thing that I want to encourage people about, is that you just never know. And that's why all of this is really helpful to do. Just having conversations, preparing how you want to speak about yourself and brand yourself, and having fun with it, really.
Yeah. I think you never know who people know.
You just
never
don't.
know who their network is. Yeah.
That's right. And they don't have to be C-level executives, right, for you to be getting good connections, right? Like you said, it could be a yoga instructor. I know you said, a fitness instructor. It could be somebody at the grocery store who knows everybody in town. There are people who do this all the time, and they are in every walk of life. So be open to who you talk to. It could be in your hiking club, whatever. So anyway, Julie, you have been a pleasure to speak with, and I'm getting a lot of great comments that say this was super helpful. So that is really encouraging, and I'm so happy we were able to provide some good information to everybody today. This will live in the Facebook group for everybody who is on, and for everybody who watches it on the replay. Please share your comments or questions, and I will provide a link to Julie's LinkedIn profile so you can get in touch with her if you'd like. But with that, Julie, I really want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you taking time out and spending it with me and the group.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Connecting and networking doesn't have to be a scary thing.
Not at all.
Conversations and go for it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having
Thumbs
me.
up to that. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. You all have a great day. And thank you again, Julie.